He knows the level and has had success before. Big pressure. It feels like there's lots of ticking clocks at Norwich. Might not be every fan's utopia, but could be exactly what Norwich need. Dean Smith's replacement at Norwich City will be David Wagner. We're expecting an announcement imminently, but lots of reliable sources going all in this morning on the German signing a rolling contract to be the boss at Carrow Road. Let's not waste any time going to the big, huge, giant elephant in the room, obvious link here, and that is that Norwich sporting director Stuart Webber previously worked with David Wagner at Huddersfield, with the Terriers winning the playoffs and being promoted up to the Premier League. Webber has been a bit under fire, under pressure recently, and seemingly chosen to go with a solution that is familiar to him and worked well before. That could be exactly the right thing to do, or not. We'll find out, I guess. The history between Stuart Webber and David Wagner is as follows then. A 31-year-old Webber took on the job as Director of Football at Huddersfield at the start of the 2015-16 season. He sacked Chris Powell, who was there when he arrived as the manager, after just 4 months and brought in David Wagner to replace him. Huddersfield finished 19th in their first season, but this sounds familiar. Jumped up 14 places to 5th and secured an unlikely promotion through the playoffs in the second season. Famously, Huddersfield finished that season in 5th, but with a minus goal difference. They made 10 changes in the final game of the season in preparation for the playoffs, and that playoff campaign featured extra time and penalties in both the semi-final and the final, with Huddersfield's only goal across the 3 games, an own goal scored by the unfortunate Tom Lees of Sheffield Wednesday. Depending on who you speak to, that Huddersfield promotion was either a masterfully brilliant exploitation of a series of situations by David Wagner, or a bit of a lightning in a bottle, doors opening up. How on earth did they manage that type of fare? I'll leave you to decide in the comments, and some input from some Huddersfield fans would be lovely down there too. Either way, Norwich fans will be very familiar with the idea of Stuart Webber and a German-born coach coming from the Borussia Dortmund setup. What I will say though is Wagner really had that group of players punching above their weight. They nailed the loan market. Moy, Kachunga, Brown and Palmer. Yes, he did get a tune out of those two. Even the shootout keeper Ward was borrowed from Liverpool. So 5 of the key players in that promotion team on loan. Other than that, Schindler was a very decent centre-back. Smith got loads of assists from right-back. If the job now at Norwich is to quickly put something together and just get over the line, then he's certainly got form from that. In the interest of balance, I should say that if Huddersfield were a bit S-housey at the end of the season, they did, throughout the campaign, look after the football. They were 3rd for possession and pass accuracy in the regular season that year. Outside of the Championship, Wagner kept Huddersfield in the Premier League for 1 season. Webber had moved on to Norwich by that point. Gravity eventually burst the bubble, and Wagner was fired with the team on the way to a pretty abject Premier League relegation. Now, I don't claim to have any great knowledge of Wagner's work following Huddersfield at Schalke and Young Boys, but a quick 5 minutes of research would lead me to conclude not his best work and the peak years were definitely at Huddersfield. So, how does Wagner do at Norwich then? Well, the expectation from everything Stuart Webber has said, plus the rolling contract and the identity of the boss, is promotion this season or next. Right now, Burnley and Sheffield United look a long way gone, don't they? So, it looks like the playoffs are the only opening for the other teams in the Championship. We've already established that Wagner has form for making the most of a playoff situation without necessarily having a perfectly flowing strategic masterpiece of a team. Given that Norwich have a year and a half of parachute payments remaining, a very strong stature at Championship level, and the slow pace points-wise below the top 2, I would say a competent manager gets Norwich into the playoffs. A good manager gets Norwich promoted this season. In terms of pros and cons, the pros, well, Wagner, he knows the level and has had success before. He knows the director of football, sporting director, and they've had success together before. And rather than being the highly process-driven philosophy Daniel Farke type manager, he seems to be able to adjust and do what it takes, which might not be every fan's utopia, but could be exactly what Norwich need right now. The cons? Well, the last couple of jobs haven't seemingly gone that well, and if this doesn't work out, everyone will look at Wagner's couple of years at Huddersfield as a peak and maybe even a flash in the pan. A lot to prove for him and big pressure. It feels like there's lots of ticking clocks at Norwich. The parachute payments for Webber, Delia Smith, even the likes of Teemu Pukki. This feels like the last play before it almost makes sense to have a bit of a reset at Carrow Road, which makes it feel like Norwich will either get promoted with David Wagner or start afresh without him. Get your thoughts in then via the comments. How do you see David Wagner doing at Norwich? My take, for what it's worth, I get Stuart Webber going back to familiar and possibly comfortable. I can see Norwich being in the playoffs. Can they win them? Yeah, of course they can. But Michael Carrick, Carlos Corberan and Slaven Bilic, plus a few others, will all be thinking exactly the same thing. And with all of that being said, I think now would be a very good time to click up here to see my take on this incredibly open championship playoff race.